So my name is Reba Collins, and I welcome you to this live video chat with Reverend Donald Bean from the Department of Youth Services. And today we're going to be talking about ministry with our young justice-involved persons and what is happening within our juvenile justice system here in the state of Ohio, particularly in response to the COVID-19 crisis pandemic that we're all currently in, but then how that response is creating new opportunities for ministry with our youth that are inside our correctional institutions. So we're going to start with just some basic questions for Donald to answer, and then we will open it up for discussion throughout this podcast. So welcome, and thank you so much for being with us. So today I just want to start with asking Donald to provide a brief overview of the Department of Youth Services and the residents that are connected with that. The number of locations and number of institutions and their locations, total number of residents, age range, and locations where the youth will be returning. So Donald, if you could just kind of start with that, just the basics for us.
Very good. Thank you for having me today. The Ohio Department of Youth Services is the state youth prison. We're the state youth prison system in Ohio. We receive youth from any of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio. They are adjudicated from the juvenile courts. Often many of the youth who come to us have been part of the criminal justice system at the county level. We get the high felony level youthful offenders that are remanded to our care. On average, well, I should say legislatively, the youth in our system are anywhere between the ages of 10 and 21. Typically, about the youngest that we see in the facility is 13 or 14. If they're younger, we typically partner with contracted facilities to have younger youth that are there. Youth in Ohio can receive a sentence of juvie life, so they stay with us to 21. And we have 3 facilities around the state. Cuyahoga Hills, which is up in Highland Hills, Ohio, or on the backside of Cleveland by Warrensville. Indian River, which is in Massillon, Ohio, and Circleville, which is just south of Columbus, Ohio. We have 3 of those 3 facilities currently, as of April. We have approximately, where's my data? I'm looking at our fact sheet. I should have sent this to you all. I will forward that to Reba so she can get it out to you. So in our April fact sheet, we have an average of 366 kids on parole. And the facilities, if I can find this here quickly for you, in our alternative placements, well, our total placements is about 460. In the juvenile correctional facilities, we have about 391 kids as of April, and about 69 kids that are in our alternative placements. There are several contracted facilities around the state where we have youth that are there for different reasons. For example, in Dayton, there's a place called Cass where we have some of our girls. Pomegranate here in Columbus, Ohio, which is mostly our girls' placements. And Paint Creek, which is a licensed contract facility down in Bainbridge, Ohio. We send some of our sex offenders there, and they have an open campus, and it's structured on an honor system. So we use some contracted facilities around the state. 100% of our youth are female youth that are on mental health caseload, and we have approximately 91% male by gender, 9% female by gender. 53% of our youth are African American, 34% are Caucasian, and 12% is other, whatever that may be. Our highest county of commitments, as it is similar in the adult system, the 19% of our youth come from Cuyahoga County. 16% are coming from Hamilton County, and then Franklin County is our third largest county of commitment, which is 12%. And then for whatever reason, typically it flip-flops around with Licking or Trumbull County, but Licking County right now is about 5%. So that's kind of where our youth are coming from. So that's a little bit about the agency. Our agency as well has been giving money to our counties. We have a program called Reclaim and Targeted Reclaim, where we provide funding to the counties to keep youth local as opposed to sending them to a state facility. The research shows that they have less trauma when you keep them local. So while we have approximately 460 kids in our system, there are other youth that are just as involved that are still at the county levels. And some of them are in juvenile detention centers, some of them are in contracted facilities, it all depends. Per diem rate, based on fiscal year 19 numbers, was right around $521 a day. So if you do the math, you're talking about $200,000 a year to house a youth in a state facility. And ladies and gentlemen, with that kind of number, with those kind of numbers, we could possibly put a kid through school. So it's so important that the community, faith-based and otherwise, is involved in partnering with our agency in the habilitation process so that we could, use those dollars more creatively. I hope I answered all the questions about DYS as best as possible through the numbers.
Yeah.
Anything specific else you might want to know?
Anything else before my next question as far as the numbers go for Reverend Bean?
What is your major crime, I guess? Is it drugs or is it burglary, theft, that type?
I think the question was what you mentioned that you received the high felony youth. So what are
Yes.
some of those? What are those crimes? What are those?
So thank you for asking if I understand correctly. So I'm going to share some numbers with you from our fact sheet as well. 49% of the youth we receive, now this does not include youth that have had their parole revoked. These are youth that are coming to us that are adjudicated from the county system. And I do need to say that the youth who come and who are in our custody are not convicted, they are adjudicated. And an adjudication and a conviction are two different sorts of sentences. And I think that's important to know, and we certainly tell our youth that. But in terms of the types of crimes, 49% of the crimes are an offense of person, which could be a felony level assault, something like that. 20.3% is a crime of property, whether that's some sort of a robbery, theft, major destruction of property, things of that nature. 12% are sex offenders. 3% are involving some sort of drug or drug trafficking or things of that nature. And 2% are 2.3% are homicides. So a lot of the issues like assault with a weapon, things like that, and the kids are dealing with a lot of major anger issues and those sort of things. But those are the list of crimes. And when I send the fact sheet over to Reba, you will see what those numbers are.
Okay, great. So,
Thank you.
Oh, and I would say as well, the average length of stay for a youth as of April 2020, the average length of stay in the facility is about 15 months. And the average length of stay on parole is about 10 months. So relatively speaking, you're talking about 2 years total, except for youth that are staying longer. And it all depends upon kind of what's going on. And if a youth who comes to us has a weapons charge, the way it kind of works in Ohio, the youth will receive either a 1, 2, or 3-year term on the weapons charge first, and then they will begin to do the time for the crime that they committed along with the weapons spec. And the judges have some discretion in terms of how they assign those sentences. And we're seeing a lot of weapons specs coming out of Cincinnati. I don't know what's going on down in that part of the state, but the youth coming to us from Hamilton County have a lot of weapons specs, things of that nature.
Great. So right now we're kind of, and thank you so much for all that information, and we will definitely disseminate out that information sheet that you were referring to. What measures has DYS taken to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 within the institutions? Because that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And I know based on some of our conversations, it looks different, and it's going to look different going forward.
Right. Thank you for asking that question. So obviously, you all are very much aware that the governor has issued a stay-at-home order that is for our staff as well. First, I would say most of our staff who are non-essential employees are working from home remotely. The same is true with the facilities. And that is so that we can limit the exposure to any sort of outside germs or infection of this COVID piece, and that being brought back into the facility. Also, in the facilities right now, the youth are restricted to their housing units, and their movement within the facility has been restricted. Their education is taking place on the housing unit. They're being fed on the housing unit. Religious services and volunteer services are happening on the housing unit, or any sort of activities, whether that's recreational, large muscle rec stuff that has to go on, that's actually happening on unit. And so we've had to make some adjustments as a team to kind of figure out how we will continue to function in light of the restrictions that have been placed on us because of the coronavirus pandemic. So it has created, well, it's kind of pushed us into a creative space, and we're having to think very creatively to meet the needs of the youth. I can tell you from a volunteer perspective, none of the volunteers are able to come into the facility now, but that does not mean that community organizations, faith-based organizations cannot serve. We just have to think about how we do it and do it differently. And even on the religious services front, we're having conversation, doing Zoom meetings and with my chaplains about how we're going to continue to provide those services and meet the needs of kids in the facility. The chaplains actually are meeting with them remotely, meeting with youth remotely when they're making requests to see the chaplain for whatever reason that they have. So the case managers or the unit managers in the facility are setting up those Zoom meetings so that we can limit exposure to the kids. We have not had any cases, thank God, in our system yet of youth that have tested positive. We've tested one youth and they were tested negative. We did have one staff person at our central office location, but they had gone home well in advance, so they're not working right now. And of course, we're all teleworking. So we've not had any instances, unlike in the adult system where you're reading some of the issues that are happening at Marion Correctional and other places where that stuff is spreading in the institution. DYS has not had that as an issue thus far. So those are some of the measures that we have taken. Of course, the typical pieces of social distancing are there, making sure that they are taking, temperatures and washing hands, and they're cleaning the facility an enormous more number of times to keep the germs from spreading and things of that nature. So those are some of the additional precautions that the agency has taken to mitigate these concerns. Any questions about that?
one? All right. So you mentioned that this has pushed you into a creative space, and you and
Yes.
I had several conversations. So, talk to us about why this would be a good time or a good opportunity for us to do ministry with the Department of Youth Services, and then talk a little bit too about what you're hearing from your chaplains about how to do this from a faith perspective, and kind of some of the assumptions that we may make that we need to be aware of. That are maybe not true. Does that make sense?
Okay, it makes a lot of sense. If you give me 1 second here. So I think to answer one of your questions, I think this is a great time for the faith community to respond, to see this as an opportunity, for ministry, because, well, one, the youth are, because they're incarcerated and behind the fence, and they're hearing all these things from whether that's the news media or from other staff. We have to make sure that the youth are safe and that they don't have a lot of fear and function out of anxiety. I think it's a great opportunity for the faith community to come and bring a message of hope, especially in such a time as this. And then there are some other needs I think that we can engage to help the faith community have an opportunity to serve during this particular time. Many people that I am talking with are still trying to figure out, well, hey, how do I do ministry, and what do you guys need? And so I think that this is a good opportunity for the faith community to engage, because it gives them a chance to continue to serve. The chaplains and I have kind of been discussing how we approach this. Certainly from a congregate service perspective, we have not been able to do that because we cannot gather youth in larger groups more than 5 people, and they got to be, 6 feet apart. So that kind of puts some hold on congregate services in the facility. But that does not mean that youth cannot be exposed, particularly for those who are Christian, to worship services and or Bible study teachings or a sermon. We just have to figure out how we get it to them. We have been exploring, trying to figure out if we can use Zoom meetings, if we can use YouTube videos and things of that nature. In fact, I'm having a conversation with a group up in Cleveland who want to provide, well, they've been going in the facility every week, and they want to do a video teaching piece for their Bible study to continue that. And so the chaplains have said to me that if those things can be put in print format, because of the restriction of movement in the facility now and limiting the numbers, they would rather send in those lessons in print format and then facilitate discussion meeting with the kids via Zoom or over the phone if they had questions. We are encouraging faith groups to, one, continue to pray for the facility. This is a great time for the faith community to adopt a facility or adopt a unit and pray for the youth that are on that unit and the staff. God knows that is certainly needed, as well as taking opportunity to perhaps send in encouraging notes or letters to the youth. There's some room for that. And then perhaps even putting something on DVD that could be mailed to the facility and given to the unit managers, and they could show that to the kids. So there's still some unique ways that we can serve. I was sharing with a group here in Columbus, and then and Reba and I talked about it on a call, as well as one of the reps from the East Ohio conference, about partnering with us to develop a concept called, whatever we call it, go home bags, or stay home for good bags, whatever it is, that the faith community could respond by providing packaged items such as toiletries and underwear and shirts, ties, pants of that nature, where we could measure youth, get the sizes of those youth to the faith community. We will put that in a duffel bag or something of that nature to provide to the kid before they come home. Even though we're in this pandemic, the kids are still going to be released. And so I think there are some ways that's one way that the faith community could respond during this particular time. Another thing could be we're exploring the notion of providing sort of religious comic books, if you will. There's a couple of companies that produce that, or graphic novels that are Christian-based that can provide some teaching there. And so those are some things I think we might want to take a peek at.
Okay.
How would one do that? Who would we contact?
So if you had an interest in, well, first of all, you can contact me. And then what I would do is, depending upon where you are, I would put you in touch with the chaplain or the program deputy at the facility. So in our system, the chaplain is the person who is the coordinator for volunteers, as well as the religious services provider in the facility. They report directly to what we call a deputy superintendent of programs. And so between the two of them, we should be able to figure it out. But maybe your first point of contact could be me, and then I can make the arrangements and get you to the right people.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Oh, and by the way, I meant to say this, I did not. Typically, when we see volunteers coming into the facility, typically those volunteers have to be 18 or older. But what we are discovering now is that there are younger people, maybe high schoolers, who might be able to help because of this situation that's going on. I mean, they can write an encouraging note to a kid. They can pray for the facility. So I think there are some creative ways that we can utilize high schoolers in doing ministry. This pandemic has caused us to kind of look at that as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think you kind of covered my last question, which was how can we bring hope and positive relationships to the youth at this time? So you pretty much covered that with all those great ideas. Just, to follow up on the whole notion that, these young people are coming home. And I know in our conversation, you said that unlike the prison system where they may go back to a community that they weren't familiar with, but because that's where their crime was committed, they return to that community. But the youth seem to be going back more to their home to live with their families. So, so if wherever you are, wherever your church or your ministry is located, then we could work with the Department of Youth Services and see if there are any young people that are coming back to your area. And I was thinking more in lines of those go packs or of those, going home to stay bags where the youth, get clothes and just the essential things they need. And talk a little bit more about that and why maybe, it's not best to hand that to them as they leave the institution, but prior to them leaving, because there's some things that have to take place where they need to be presentable in nice clothes, and that's also part of the whole learning experience. So just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll open it up for questions, creative thoughts, those kind of things.
Good, thank you for the opportunity. It's funny, I just got off a conference call about 15 minutes before this one with my reentry team, and we were dialoguing about this concept a little bit more. So we know, usually we know 3 to 6 months out when a youth is going to be released. We use the language released to parole in our system. And in our conference call, we talked about providing a 30 to 60 day window of time to the community to say to them, hey, we have this kid that's coming home, and we would provide a list to the community group of the items that we recommend them to have, but also we want to give opportunity for the youth to talk about some of the things that they might need that may be specific to them. One example on the call was that while most of us men may shave, some youth have some skin sensitivities and may not be able to all use a certain sort of shaving gel or powder or whatever it is they use. And so we want to be able to allow the youth to be able to provide some specifics about what their needs are. Our reentry administrators do want to ensure that youth have appropriate clothing when they are going before the release authority and or to meet with their judge prior to being released. We do have some items that are in our facility that people donate, and we're developing like a clothing bank in the facility. So certainly faith communities can donate to that, where kids will be able to have a shirt and a tie and appropriate khakis and shoes to wear, so that when they go before a judge or they go before a release authority panel, they're dressed appropriately. And as reentry administrator said today, they tend to perform much better when they're dressed like that. But it's also important to make sure that when kids are returning home, when they leave the facility, that they have appropriate clothing for the weather, and or if they are going to job interviews or going to visit a college or something of that nature. And so we thought that it would be a good opportunity for the faith community to respond, to provide those items. Today on the call, they mentioned that some youth who are going home may be engaged in some sort of training programs like carpentry, or maybe they're trying to become an apprentice electrician or something of that nature. And they may need tools or steel toe boots and things like that. So if there are specifics that are necessary for that sort of thing, for trade skills, we want to be able to allow the youth to make a request for those items too, even though there was a state agency, I forget what the initial is OOD, I can't remember what the agency is, but they provide that for those kids. So we certainly want to be able to partner with the community to help them have the things that they need so they can be successful in their training programs when they go home. And it's a benefit to the family too, because some of the family members where youth are able to go back to them may not have the resources to provide those things. And we certainly don't want the youth to feel any sort of pressure from their family to do things. And sometimes kids will go back and reoffend because they're trying to provide. Some families may be embarrassed and may not want to ask. And so, I think it's important to kind of take those issues off the table, and the faith community can help with that as well.
Great.
Hope that answered the question.
It did. Thank you so much. So now I'm just opening it up to you all as participants. What questions do you have, or even thoughts or suggestions of, ministry, any, just whatever comes to mind at this point. It's an open chat.
I was
Just have a
wondering-
comment, Reba. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
No, go right ahead.
Let's go with Vicki and then Michaela.
So I just have kind of a comment. I'm the retired superintendent of the Central Ohio Youth Center, which is a juvenile correctional facility in Marysville. And we had, and they still have, a correctional treatment program. And I can't tell you how many times we sat in pre-release meetings and talked to kids about when they get home, reaching out to the faith community, knowing that the likelihood that a teenager is going to walk into a church by him or herself and say, hey, I think I'd like to be a part of your community, is probably highly unlikely. So I think if we can work with DYS to kind of catch those kiddos before they leave and reach out to them when they get to the community, I think we would have it would be much more likely that we can get them to come to a church than to expect them to just show up on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Vicki, for bringing that out. I'm glad you said that. I completely forgot to talk about that. So all of my chaplains and I, when we meet, we talk about the need for them to develop relationships with the community around them. So like, Cleveland, obviously, Cuyahoga County obviously is replete with a number of churches. And then Massillon, of course, is more remote, but Canton and Akron are still have a great number of faith communities that are there. And then, of course, Circleville is blessed to be just south of Columbus. But having said that, coming into when we have opportunity for the faith community to come in, or if you're able to do any sort of volunteer or religious services, even in this situation, it allows you opportunity to establish a relationship with the youth prior to them being released. The beauty of that is that, the benefit is that when a kid is behind the fence, you kind of have them in a captive audience. And it's a great time to provide ministry service and provide care and genuine love, things of that nature. Our hope is that the youth will continue to have a relationship with the faith community when they go home. And so the chaplains and I have been talking about strategy to try to develop partnership with the community so that when the kids leave our custody and care, that same level of custody and care can continue when they get home. So they don't get lost in the sauce, if you will. Because usually what happens is when they get on parole, they are in the wind. And if you have not established relationship with those kids prior to them being released, it's not going to happen when they're on the street because there's just too many other distractions. We know the kids who have come to Christ and have a sincere relationship with Christ, those kids will make connection. It's the other ones that we have to really kind of press the envelope with. And they are in our communities, they are in our churches, their families are with us. And so we don't want to make, we don't want to make a mistake and think they're not there. They're coming back to the community. And I would say as well, something that Vicki said, I often, when I'm talking to faith people, say to faith communities that that it's important, I think, for the faith community to still provide acts of service and love without necessarily expecting people to come and join our communities of faith. That's what the Lord would have us do. There's a verse in the book of Mark that talks about people bringing the lame, the palsy, and the sick, and them laying them at the feet of Jesus. And the text says he healed them. And the next verse says he went on to another town. So often when I'm teaching faith communities, I'm saying to them that Jesus would do acts of love and kindness towards people without the expectation of them joining the faith community. Of course, we want that to happen. But I think the genuine act of service can really dig up some of that ground and allow opportunity for somebody to come and share the gospel and plant some seeds in these kids' lives. That's what I want to share about that.
Michaela, you had a comment or a question?
Yes, just a quick question. I was just wondering,
there she is.
as you talked about the measures that were implemented to keep the kids safe and the staff safe as well, I didn't hear whether or not they're allowed to wear masks.
So the agency is providing some PPE equipment for those who need it. Obviously, in our system, we have doctors, we have nurses in the system, and they would have that equipment. We are allowing staff to wear those in the facility. I don't know the answer to the question about the youth wearing masks. I have to find out about that. I'm sure that that's been addressed, but I'll have to check into that and pass that back along through Reba.
Okay.
I have a
Thank you so
question.
much.
Yes, who had a question?
I have a question.
Roy, yes.
Yeah, we're about 50 miles south of Columbus, and every church in the area is live streaming their services. Would there be an opportunity for us to have live streamed from the youth pastors with sermons or worship services that would be geared toward the youth? that they could sign up for if they wanted to. If they had a list of 3 or 4 different places they could plug into and enjoy a service on the midweek or on a Friday, or it could be live streamed on Facebook and they can pick it up when they want to.
Good question.
Yes, thank you, Roy. Thank you, Roy, for asking that question. We have had that discussion. So some of the facilities have some constraints in terms of equipment and the way the facility is set up. I think, now you said, what city are you from, Brother Roy?
Logan, Ohio.
Logan. So you would be closer to Circleville, if you will. You're just, Logan is a little south of Athens, if I remember correctly.
North.
North of Akron. Okay. Yes, I know where Logan is. So the answer to the question is yes. And I was so glad to hear you say services that are done by youth pastors. It's really important to make sure that when we bring things before the people in the juvenile system, that we're very youth-centered and youth-oriented, and the kids will relate to that much better. Yes. So the chaplain at Circleville has suggested, because of some of the constraints in the facility right now, and because we can't really gather them together, we thought we were going to be able to do live streaming on the units, but because of the safety precautions, we are limiting the number of kids that we can bring in one space. And on the units, there's a particular space, a program room on the housing unit at Circleville that has some equipment in it, but you can't bring, a lot of kids together to do that. But what we can do is take that live streaming piece and put it on DVD and pass that to the unit managers, and they can show that to the kids individually. We are having some, based on the conference call that I had today with the program activities team, that's looking at how we creatively address programming in light of the pandemic. We are having some conversation about acquiring tablets that each youth might have. The tough part is making sure that we have tablets that are correctional grade so that youth don't have things with glass or metal that could be used as a weapon or used to harm themselves. And so we have to have the appropriate sort of equipment to give them if we're buying individual items like that. But there's some conversation I know down at Circleville about providing those things.
30 and about 11 to 45.
I'm sorry, Roy?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, was he talking to somebody else? Okay.
Go ahead.
He's doing parenting things. So yeah, I think if we can put that on DVD and play that individually, that would be great. Now, post-pandemic, I think we still need to do that. I think that's one way to get other messages into the facility and provide people, access to different voices, if you will.
I had a question around when you talked about the Reclaim, program. You didn't mention Montgomery County. I guess it's one of the places where there is the less number of people coming from there, but you didn't mention CAS, which was, I guess, a program for females. If you could just tell us a little bit more about CAS or those Reclaim opportunities in Montgomery County.
So Reclaim and targeted so there's Reclaim and there's targeted Reclaim. Targeted Reclaim, the agency gives, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I don't want to misquote it. It is available on our fact sheet that's on the website in terms of the amounts that are given. The dollars are given to the juvenile courts. And the juvenile judges have discretion about how they use that to provide funding for youth that are in the justice system to keep them local as opposed to sending them to a state facility. So for example, and I can't remember who the judge is down in Montgomery County, but whoever the juvenile judge is there, they have dollars that the state has given them to do creative programming, and the courts use that at their discretion. So instead of sending a kid to us who may have maybe a first-time offender, or it's a lower level offense, instead of expending the dollars to pay for a state bed, they would then use that money to put that kid through some sort of local programming. CAS, or the state contracted facilities, is different. In the contracted facilities, we have some kids, some of the facilities have specialized programming. For example, at Paint Creek, which is in Bainbridge, Ohio, I mentioned that they have a program there for sex offenders. They do some unique treatment for sex offenders. For kids that can do well there and that are not a flight risk, we may send them to that particular campus. It's an open campus. There's an honor system. You know, they're not trying to escape. They can wear the clothes they want to wear. It has a feel of being at home as opposed to an institutional feel. And so that we have contracts with facilities like that where we send kids there to try them out there as opposed to keeping them in one of the state facilities. But those are driven by us. All of our girls, however, are in state contracted facilities. We got about 20 girls who, by the way, still need ministry programming. That's a horse of another color. But as opposed to having all the girls in our state facility, and then you're addressing issues about, you know, how you keep them separated from the boys and inappropriate interaction between staff and the girls, or youth and the girls, or volunteers and the girls, or contractors and the girls. It's easier for us to put them in a contracted facility where they're more safe. And usually most of those girls are at Pomegranate here in Columbus, Ohio. We have an administrator who works with them, Jessica Jefferson. So she and I have been talking about how we get volunteer services to them. And they're looking at trying, she wants to really spend some time with the community to identify mentors for them, mothers who can come in and teach them how to parent their kids, because we have girls who have children and all that sort of stuff. So it's a whole different kind of, working with the girls is very different.
What is the reclaim? You said the targeted reclaim, but then what is reclaim?
So reclaim is money that's set aside for the counties, but it's not the big 6 counties. Targeted reclaim is Cuyahoga, Franklin, West Toledo, Lucas, Hamilton, Montgomery, I forget the other one. So targeted reclaim is the big 6 counties, and reclaim is all the other counties. Some of the counties share juvenile detention centers because the counties are small, but most of the counties have their own juvenile court system.
Okay, great.
Let me look on the fact sheet and see if I can find what those numbers are.
Okay. Other
Any other?
questions? Yeah. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Or discussion about possible ministry ideas that have popped into your head. And it's okay to say, hey, would this be something that would be good or not? So, you know, and I know that, you know, Donald mentioned youth, and I don't know if you want to highlight a little bit more about kind of the faith experience of a lot of the youth that are in your facilities, and how that might be different than youth that have been raised in the church, so to speak.
Yes. So now let me say this. First off, all of my chaplains are Christian chaplains. It does not have to be that way. A chaplain does not have to be Christian. They could be Buddhist. They could be Islamic. They can be from any other faith assertion, but all of the chaplains that we have are Christian chaplains. The role of religious services in the correctional facility, the role of the chaplain is to provide for the spiritual needs of the residents. And when the chaplains come across youth who are a part of other faith assertions, we have to accommodate their faith, and we have to provide them access so that they can practice their faith. What the youth believe is one thing, but how we allow them to practice their faith is another thing, because our concern is maintaining the safety and good order in the facility. Having said that, youth in our system oftentimes may encounter multiple faiths based on who they contact in the facility, whether that's staff or whether that's youth or whether they're just exploring. And so because of the age of the kids, because of the age of the youth, often they are exploring. Many of the youth who come to us have no faith assertion whatsoever. They often don't have a sense of what you and I would call moral values. They have some sense of values because they got street values, but it may look different than what you and I have encountered growing up in church. So my chaplains do not have to provide services outside of their expertise. I tell them, you be the best Christian God is calling you to be. So we don't flex with that. So it provides a unique opportunity to share the gospel in that sense. But when we have youth that are from other faith expressions, we meet their needs. So part of my job is to maintain relationships with other faith leaders in the community. I have some wonderful Islamic friends and colleagues, and I try to get into the facility to meet the needs of the youth who are there. I've been talking to our chaplains about doing some things like world religion fairs so that we can educate kids about various different types of faith so they don't have to, make it up and they're not functioning out of ignorance. But I think it's a good opportunity for you all to come in to, one, share the love of God, to share the gospel message, to share the basic tenets of the faith, like what is Christianity? How do you become a Christian? And then, of course, from there, different things in terms of their development, but basic things like teaching things like truth and peace and love and, helping them with those kind of basic tenets is very, very helpful in their development. Because these kids are, using the words of one of my Kojic friends, they're thirsty. And if we don't give it to them, somebody else is going to give it to them. So, but it's a pluralistic context. It's really, when I'm a conservative Black Baptist preacher, so, me talking like this is kind of funny, but it's a pluralistic context. And so I think for the Christian faith community, it provides a great opportunity for evangelism.
Great, thank you.
I hope that answered that question.
Yeah.
And I hope y'all don't think I'm a heathen. I'm very much a strong believer.
But those are things that, as particularly if we go back and start talking to our youth directors, right, about that.
Yes.
This is a different context. Like you said, it's a pluralistic context, and so we have to be very cognizant of that, and also how we present peace, love, and truth with our youthful. So. Yes,
I'm reminded Chaplain Bell, who was up in Cleveland, and he just was extended a call to a local pastorate in Cleveland. So I'm about to lose one of my chaplains, if you will. But Chaplain Bell often says, tongue in cheek, it's kind of like when Paul was ministering in Acts, when he went to that place called Mars Hill, and they had this monument to the unknown God. And so he kind of sees ministry behind the fence as an opportunity to really expose people to what Christianity really is about. and who Christ really is. So it's not unknown, it's not foreign,
Right.
but it is that kind of a different kind of context. The other thing is, Reba mentioned, it's different than going into an adult facility. In the adult facility, most of the adults have come to a place where they have decided what they believe. The youth are still in formation and development, even up to about the age of 4. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you come into our system.
Okay, great, thank you. Other thoughts or questions? We're coming up on 2 o'clock in about 5-6 minutes. So I don't want us to extend over an hour.
3 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're coming up on 3 o'clock. Sorry. I just read the first number. Any other thoughts, questions?
There you go.
How do we contact you?
So in the chat box, I put my email there. I'm gonna send over my cell phone number as well.
Okay.
So you guys can call me on my state cell phone.
And I will capture all that information, and this will be one of the things that I send back out to you guys, either today or tomorrow. Everybody who's on the call and the information of how to get a hold of Donald.
And then if you guys want to be involved and do some ministry stuff, we can just call me and we'll figure it out. We have to do, of course, with our faith volunteers coming behind the fence, we have to do volunteer training. But right now, if you want to do some, send in some Bible study lessons or an encouraging note or put some sermon on video or a Bible study lesson on video, or even if you want to just do a practical life skill workshop. One faith group in Columbus is going to do a piece where they have professionals from their congregation. They're going to video shoot that person talking about what they do for a living. And then we're going to play that behind the fence. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of introduce themselves to the youth. So it's not necessarily a faith-based program, but it's faith-based people doing a program. And then later on, when they're able to come in, they want to actually come in and do some other stuff. So hopefully the youth will kind of be familiar with their faces and that kind of stuff. And a relationship will be established. So that's something else to think about as well, that even though you are a faith-based organization, you could do non-faith-based programming, practical, life skills pieces.
I have a question.
Yes.
I help with the Kairos program in the adult penitentiaries, but
Yes.
is there any opportunity for Chrysalis to participate in something like a weekend retreat for some of these kids in the detention homes?
Yes. So there is the opportunity for us to do that. One of my strategies for volunteer engagement is to connect faith people to the national, prison ministry models, Kairos, Prison Fellowship, Epiphany, Bill Glass, Youth for Christ, things like that. So some of those ministries need help with recruiting people. Kairos in our facilities has struggled with finding relevant volunteers. Most of their volunteers are older. That doesn't mean that it's not effective, but when you talk about relatability, it's important to think about that. And so when I'm talking to faith communities now, I'm saying, hey, you got to think about having some of your younger members, be a part of these other national ministries. But the one that you mentioned, sure, we like to take a look at it. If it's a structured program, if it's a weekend kind of piece, we would just need to kind of talk with the chaplain in the facility, have you present a proposal, and then we look at it and figure out how to make it work. So the answer is yes, we can do it, but we have to figure out the details.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Very quickly, we have about a minute left. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Donald, for coming on the call and spending an hour with us. And hopefully all of you who were able to tune in and watch and be a part of this, that you got some new creative things going, and also able to make that connection of, boy, if we can establish those relationships early with our young folks, that we are really changing the trajectory of their life. And also it's a great opportunity for us to just help our youth in their search for their faith, and lead them to Christ in a very gentle way. So that's really incredibly empowering, I think, for us as Christians to think about that. And I'm not assuming we're all Christians, but all of our faiths. So again, thank you all for being here. We do have, if you are of the inclination and are concerned about what is happening within our state facilities and our justice involved folks in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we do have we're starting Wednesday an online prayer. And it's just 15-20 minutes of just praying for those individuals that are justice involved in whatever capacity they are. And then next week, next Monday at noon, we have readlink.org. They are the online platform that our ODRC, our state prison agency, uses for reentry services and helping folks to reenter and locating the services that are required. And that is open to us as well. And so we've had, I know we've had some pastors that have used it when somebody has knocked on their door and said, hey, I have some basic needs. And you can search this platform and find the closest needs or the closest organizations that can meet those needs. So it's just a great tool to have in your toolbox, and they're going to take us through that platform and how to use that most effectively. So that's next Monday at noon. And I will send that in the email follow up to this as well. So we'll get some information from Donald. I will compile that and get it all sent back out to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, you'll have Donald's information in a day or two, and feel free to reach out to him. Again, thank you, Donald, for the time together.
Thank you all for your time.
Yes. So, Tom, would you please pray us out?
Okay. Oh, on that relink, was that Monday or Tuesday?
Oh, I don't know. I thought it was Monday. It may be Tuesday. Good question. Let me look at my calendar. It is Tuesday. My mistake. Tuesday, April 28th at noon.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Okay. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you that we've had this opportunity to learn more about how we can be in ministry to our young people. And we ask that you make this time something that will not just go away by the wayside, but that we will be able to reach out to churches and various people to help them and show them how that they can change the lives of young people, to encourage them as well as help them to come to experience Jesus Christ as their Savior. So we ask that good things will happen as a result of this meeting today, and may you receive the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. And we also ask your protection during this time as well upon the staff and the youth. That you will, we thank you that maybe they've had a little better experience in some of our adult prisons in regard to the COVID-19, but we pray that that continues. And so surround them with your guardian angels. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.